Questions. What happens if I say I hope the method self-destructs? Like I have a guru, and then the guru dies. And then I have some pictures and some stories. And I tell the stories and I look at the pictures. And I talk to him. And then that was 21 years ago. Now what's happened in the course of the 21 years is then more and more I experienced my guru as a set of qualities like rascality and compassion and giggling and fierceness and so on. And I related to the qualities rather than to the stories and to the pictures. And then after a while, the qualities started to all become present all at once. And then I started to feel like slowly, the dualism was leaving. There was nobody out there. It was just presence in it. And in a way, therefore, my guru is self-destructing into a transformation of my own being. And so I end up not in a dualistic relationship to a guru because what I honored in him was the same thing that's in me. Or in the word in is a hype, of course, so don't take it literally. So that's in other words, you use methods and they are incredibly beautiful methods. And at first you use a method to go somewhere, and then when you get in the model of like it's a trip and you're going somewhere, that the idea of journey and all, and then in the course of that you see that there is no journey and there is no trip, and you're already here and all that stuff, and then you're finished with the method, but you don't stop the method because then the method becomes a celebratory thing. You're just celebrating what you found. You're not doing it out of need but out of celebration. It's a whole different ballgame. And when Anandamayi Ma is singing to Jai Bhagwan, it's not because she's trying to use dualism in order to get liberated. That's all long past. She is just celebrating the beloved. And so you can take the same method and be using it from a very different set of places. About what? Yeah. He's asking about lineage versus eclecticism. There was a moment when Rinpoche and I were doing a dialogue together, and a lot of us were discussing this a lot, but I remember one particular moment, and there were many more with all of us involved, but in which we agreed that freedom was the issue. And then I said, was there anything he wouldn't give up for freedom? And he said, his lineage. And I said, well, better luck next life. Oh boy, what chutzpah, what I see is that there are exquisitely articulated methods for the transformation of the heart-mind. And that these methods are in a variety of traditions. And that as those methods are passed down purely from one heart to another. See, I realize now that the power of anything I say to you is based on the truth of the nature of it and where it's coming from in my being. If I'm speaking from a place in my being that is my deepest truth, and it's not a hustle, there is a likelihood that if that truth is the way it is, it will resonate with that place in you, and you will feel safe to explore that place in yourself. And I realize that that's how faith works in the transmission of things. And since I don't know what of the things I'm saying, which ones are true and which ones are not, they all sound true to me. What you do is you say it as best you can, and other people you say trust your heart and use what you can use, and whatever else you can, don't use. You don't have to decide I'm crazy or anything. Just say, I don't have business with that particular thing at this moment. In the story of lineages, the transmission is passed from individual to individual and through specific teachings. And I think we should honor and appreciate and treasure the fact that human consciousness has valued and transmitted ways to become free. And I think that's what honoring a lineage means. I think that we've got to separate the practice of honoring a lineage from the result of honoring the lineage, which is to be free. And that means free of lineage. It's not free. It's not, you can't be free of all form. You're free within form. And within form, you can be in the lineage. So I can meet you in your Sikh lineage, or meet a Naropa person in their Nyingma or Kaju or whatever lineage. And if we are real mensches, I mean, if we are really beings, mature beings, we will look each other in the eye and we will respect each other's journey without feeling coerced or judged or anything has to be changed. Now, I've been put down a lot for my eclecticism. I'm sort of a dilettante, and people say you shouldn't dig shallow wells, you should dig a deep well. And all I can say is that when I, in my heart of hearts, look at all the people I have known now, and I'm 63, my body's 63, look at all the people I've known over the last 30 years that have been following lineages, doing practices, not following lineages, doing practices, not following lineages, not doing practices, I am hard-pressed to see a hell of a lot of difference. So it may well be that what's happening to us is happening independent of what we think we're doing, which I think is a fascinating idea. I mean, I think it's more fun than that it's the result of what I think I'm doing. That's absurd. So I'm being a little facetious, but you understand. Questions? Yes? Would I say a few words about the Course in Miracles? I feel like Khalil Gibran's the prophet. Will speak to us of, well, the Course in Miracles. A lot of my friends have worked deeply with the Course in Miracles, and they're people whom I respect and love, and they have grown immensely through doing the practices, the exercises, and all of that. It is not my path. I read it, I think it's lovely, but I don't feel any of the power from it because it's not my way. I'm already busy. But I see it as a beautiful method, and I see it working well for people. So, because there are all these ways through. I mean, it's interesting too, when you're listening to somebody and they're asking for method, to have, you're not giving a stock thing to each person. You're listening to hear their karmic predicament, out of which emerges the method. And so it's like your karma very much defines your dharma in that sense. I really see different people using incredibly different methods and that there is a deeper yearning for the truth, for the real ultimate lineage, the lineage of consciousness. Yes? She said that she heard a rumor that I was going to an ecstasy party, and where am I with regard to that now in this day in 1994? Is that fair enough? You didn't hear the rumor that was just written material. Right. Friday night at around 1:30 to 3, I spoke at Club Zero on College, whatever that avenue is, at a rave, which is a gathering which originally was spawned and supported by, and it's very active in England, and I had just done one in London, by the use of ecstasy or MDMA as a vehicle for energizing one, obviously, and also energizing one in a compassionate way. And the history of it in London is interesting because it started out where people would go to these clubs and they would take ecstasy and then they would dance intensely for 10, 15 hours and be very loving, feel very loving towards each other. And in that sense, it was like a ritual. It was like a ritual for them. And what happened to them over time was that because in my experience, ecstasy has a speed component in it, which I find I don't like the reentry from. I ended up, I started to hear that they were starting to use less and less ecstasy, but still going to the club for the rave dances, which is interesting. That what happened was that through the chemical, it imbued the scene with a ritualistic set of things, of you go in, you're loving, you go in, you have high energy. And then they use less and less of the chemical, and they still do the same thing. That interested me as a social phenomenon. Because if there's one thing that seems to be missing in our culture, and I just finished giving a lecture in Los Angeles on a lecture weekend with Laura Huxley in honor of Aldous' 100th birthday. And for that, I was talking about Island and Brave New World. And Island was Aldous' last book, in which he talks about a culture that is a reasonable culture from his point of view. And in the course of that, when a kid is between 15 and 17, the girls and the boys go through an initiative ritual which involves climbing down a mountain. It involves a lot of physical demand, like an outward bound type thing. And then they're brought into a temple where they take the moksha medicine, which allows them to see the nature of what their life has been up to then from a different perspective. So the way I feel about psychedelics, which might be lurking in the question, I don't know, is that, first of all, I would be a terrible hypocrite if I didn't honor the way they have served me. That would be, I don't think I could live with myself if I did that. A lot of people would like me to do that, by the way. I really experience that psychedelics have a profound sacramental potential value in a culture. The predicament is that this culture has some very deep seeds of discontent within it. In the inner cities, that discontent is real because of oppression, because of ethnic prejudice, because of ceilings on life opportunities. And that real pressure and real ceiling often leads to using drugs as an escape from the pain of what that is. And that is what often crack is used for. Crack is an escape in that sense. In the middle class in the society, there is the predicament of many people who played the game as hard as they could, and they won by the culture's criteria, but they're still not feeling at peace or happy, or they feel they worked hard and they did it right, and somehow they aren't feeling as good as they should feel, as long as they, as good as the ads say they're gonna feel when they've done that, you know. And then Coke becomes that vehicle. And since there is such an extensive use of drugs as an escape mechanism, it is a major threat to the society, because it keeps undercutting the social structures of the society, and it brings in all kinds of stuff. So the law, hence the laws and the prison terms and all this kind of off the deep, deep paranoia and fear and pain. And psychedelics is one of the casualties of all that at this moment. It's different from the opiates. It's a very different thing. Tryptamines have a different use. And because the use of psychedelics is so dependent on set and setting, which is something we've known now for 20 years, that all the chemical does is loosen the fabric of the structures of the mind. I mean, not all it does. I mean, it does this. The question of where the mind goes with that is determined by your preparation, your expectations, along with the setting in which you're taking it. Now, if you're using something that is illegal in a setting where there is a lot of drug paranoia, you've got to expect that when you're taking this pill, with it, you are taking all of the cultural attitudes about it as well. So that one could argue that psychedelics, that the travelers with psychedelics that want to use that as a spiritual practice, and I think it's as valid a spiritual practice as any other, must realize that this is not necessarily the optimum culture in which to be using that practice. Like there may be practices where it's fine to eat hearts, but I don't think this is one of them. So, but if you are going to use it, then you've got to be appreciative of the way in which, how profound it is. And I am inclined to be saying to people of different ages, when they say, should I use psychedelics? I would say, it is not for me to tell you whether to. You have to get as much education as you can and then make your own decision. There is freedom of consciousness. You should have that. What I would say if they ask my advice is, if you don't have your act together on the physical, psychological plane, it may be better to get that first, to give you a launching pad that makes it a little easier to move in and out. Because a lot of my friends from the 60s lost a lot of ground because they didn't have a re-entry place that was attractive to them. And when you've got a lot of social, sexual, economic problems at certain stages of your life, to then move your consciousness out into all these planes, it's fine. I mean, I have no moral judgment about it. I just think as a strategy, you ought to be thoughtful about it. Because as a strategy, the way I say it is, it's better to become somebody before you become nobody. Get your somebody out of the way and then do your nobodiness and then come on back. Then you can be nobody being somebody. So that's a long answer to the question. And I didn't take the ecstasy, no, because I don't like the re-entry. I've taken it maybe 40, 50 times. And I went there, and I don't think many people there were on ecstasy. Didn't seem like an ecstatic group to me, so we'll see. I think the rave phenomenon has a potential. I think young people are looking for, I mean, I've gone to Grateful Dead concerts for years as a religious celebration. I mean, it is a place where it feels safe to open your consciousness, unless you're in the parking lot. And I think that it's a place in which I have seen it as one of the living churches in this country for about 25 years. I don't know how long it'll live. Institutions have a very short half-life, but what the hell? Questions? Yes? Well, I'll tell you, I don't think you should blow up fundamentalism and conservatism too much. I just don't give it too much juice. I would much rather have you spend your time cultivating love and compassion and realize that in this case, what we are wiser in the 90s than we were in the 60s. We are now aware of the fact that what we did in the 60s, as I said before, helped polarize the country. And a polarization destroys the fabric of the system. It feeds the thing. And I hope our wisdom is deep enough now in the 90s that we can, our collective wisdom, that we can recognize that unless everybody goes, nobody goes. And so that instead of the kind of thought forms that keep turning other people into them, keep working with the quality of usness. See, I've been, like in the political arena, I was not, a great cheerleader of Bill Clinton in terms of his spiritual consciousness. I like Jerry Brown's ideas better, although I didn't like his heart so much. But Bill Clinton became president, and he still represented a great leap forward over what had been president. And then the question I asked myself was, what is my responsibility as a member of a participatory democracy to help Bill Clinton do what he needs to do? Let's assume he's an intelligent person and Hillary's an intelligent person, and the two of them are smart enough to really see that the only game in town is the relief of suffering. But the way he's gotten there is primarily through his thinking mind. He's a Rhodes Scholar, they think, and he thinks a lot, and he's also got a lot of political acumen. So he's got the right intention. But I was afraid, and I realized that he understood that everybody had to go and nobody had to go. And I said, therefore, I will be prepared for his centrist policies. I will be prepared for the policies of his that I don't agree with. And I'll be ready to tolerate that and to embrace it, understanding that he's sitting in a position that I'm not, and I trust his intention, and he knows what I don't know, therefore I will support it. As the year went on, I found it harder and harder to do that. It just wore away at me. And I started to have some distrust that in the zeal to bring everybody along, whatever it was we were bringing along for would be forgotten. Last year, I'm on the board of a thing called the Social Venture Network, which is a group of businesses and people like businesses and that get together to try to figure out whether the idea of socially responsible business is an oxymoron. And they're great groups. There are groups like Levi Strauss and Ben & Jerry's and in Body Shop and things like that. Calvert Fund, Rocky Mountain. At any rate, we started another organization, a front organization, so that we could have more fun together. And it was called BSR, Businesses for Social Responsibility. We had the first meeting in Washington, and Bill Clinton was our guest speaker. So I had a chance to sit about 8 feet from him for about an hour, watching him talk and watching his body language and just feeling another human being there. And I came away with a renewed sense that there was a real human being in there. And so I decided, what am I can do to help? Well, I had one friend who I had just recently met, who I really liked, who was a speechwriter in the White House. So I started a dialogue with him. And I said to him, is there any silence in the White House? Is there any contemplative or reflective space? Does anybody not have line power and just hold the vision? Is there anybody in any of the decision making that recognizes that non-thinking is a way to the solution? And he wrote back a letter and he said, no. But the way he said no was interesting because in his description of his life within the Beltway, I felt like I was receiving a letter from somebody in a Vietnam foxhole at the height of the war, ducking all the time. Just what was going on each week. And I thought, isn't it bizarre to ask somebody who hasn't spent their life in training to be equanimous and to recognize the intuitive wisdom that lies behind thought and be contemplative. I'm asking people to be contemplative in the middle of a foxhole? You know, how unrealistic. But he said, I'm very interested in that. And it's interesting, like at the moment when the Dalai Lama met Bill Clinton in Al Gore's office, Dalai Lama bowed and he said, Mr. President, you are the most important leader in the world today. And it's vital that your every act be motivated solely by compassion. I mean, wow. If you got a one-liner, you got just time to give one line. What a beautiful one-liner, you know? I'll follow that man. So I started to think about starting the President Bill Club. I realized I didn't want to have a membership club, but I wanted to have something that was saying to him, there is a lobby, there is a constituency out here that is asking you to trust a deeper part of your being and connect to that, and we are rooting for you to do that. You know? And I honestly don't know how to do that except to just keep doing it. And so that's an answer to some question or other. Yes. She's asking in how you bring a contemplative or heart quality into an academic environment, an intellectual discipline. I think is that the question? Yeah. I'm looking at my watch because we have at 11 o'clock, this turns back into a pumpkin, so I have to. It's certainly, the inner work for you is to cultivate a perspective within yourself that sees your intellect as a servant of you, rather than as your basic identity. To the extent you are capable of doing that, you can then play the game of academia, do the work that only can be done in that analytic fashion without you being trapped in it. And then your interaction with other people is through the game. It's like Monopoly, in which you're the top hat and I'm the thimble. But behind it, you here, I'm here, and you've got to be there. And the predicament in academia is many people identify with their thoughts so much that they think they are an academic, instead of being a being who is doing academia, or however you would say that, if you understand that distinction, right? And for me, the fun is meeting people through all the roles we meet and playing each one as impeccably as I can without getting trapped in any of them. So that my consciousness is always an environment that's open to meeting somebody behind the game, if you will. And yet there's nothing in me that says this game is bad or shouldn't be played, because it's a beautiful game. And I think that the predicament in our society a lot, as you probably all appreciate with me, is the way in which the siddhi, or the power of the prefrontal lobes, the power of that conceptual mind, we have become so enamored of it, we have lost perspective about the fact that it has to be tempered by wisdom. That knowledge and technology as its offshoot isn't inherently good. It's not inherently evil, it just is. But it requires a tremendous more wisdom than most of us have, especially when we reject all the wisdom carriers in our society as being irrelevant because of the way we treat aging. Because in a technological society where things are changing so fast, you don't ask somebody who uses a typewriter about the latest computer program. And that's a generational issue. The interesting question is, that isn't the wisdom part. There is a wisdom that tempers the way actions are done, and we just don't value it very much in our society. And that's part of what I think we could shift to. When somebody said, where are we and what's going to happen before, I will tell you that very honestly, I feel that the environmental imminence of very much more disruptive stuff than we have yet seen in reasonably short time spans. And I feel that the seeds of social shift, of family structure changes, of all the stuff you're familiar with, just like I am, when I hear it all, I really do hear an increasing presence of uncertainty and feeling of chaos in the situation. I mean, when 12 and 13-year-olds are planning their own funerals because they don't think they'll live till 15, it's interesting. I mean, there was a study done of school kids, and in the school kids, teachers of junior high school students in a certain set of cities in 1940. What is the list of the most difficult problems you have with these kids? The list includes chewing gum, talking out of in class, wearing inappropriate clothing, not lining up. In 1990, the list is pregnancy, abortion, rape, guns. That's the same schools, by the way. Same age teachers, the same comparable population. That shifting environment we're living in terms of our air, our water, our fish, our animals, our bodies, our psychological spaces, we haven't even begun to realize the profound impact of the information dance that changes the meaning of time on all of our social institutions. This is all up for grabs at the moment. And in that ferment, the question is, what part do we play in all of that? What is a conscious person to do? And my feeling is that our ability to work on the part of our being that is able to be in the presence of change and uncertainty and chaos and respond to that, not react to it, but respond to it in a reflective way, to turn that and help that move into a deeper and new harmony. And you can't hold on anywhere. You can't hold on anywhere. I think that the assignment for us is very clear in terms of the game on Earth. I think it is to be instruments that allow the whole process to move and change in a way that ends up celebrating life rather than ultimately destroying it. And it has to come out of non-attachment. And find me one. That's the issue of fear of death. It's all those issues. You've got to, in order to play this game, you have got to be able to look suffering directly in the eye. You can't cop out and say, this is unbearable. You have to bear the unbearable. And you want the final demand, you've got to bear the unbearable and giggle. And if you can't bear the unbearable and giggle, we'll wait. Because you will hide in righteousness as long as you can. This is too horrible for me to giggle. Well, if you don't want the world to have any giggling in it. I mean, the storyline of suffering is so immense and so horrific that how do you keep a giggle? How do you do it? Well, I wish you luck in finding out. It has to do with recognizing that there is more than one plane of consciousness on which human beings exist. And developing that and celebrating it and understanding it so that you can be in absolute equanimity at the same moment as you are passionately involved in all of the work of the world. All of the stuff. All of the stuff. I work with AIDS. I work with business. I work with development in Guatemala. I work with the blind in Nepal. I work with individuals. I work with people dying. I work on and on and on. And all of that is my celebration. That's the part in the dance. And in it all, I am absolutely empty. And at first that scared the hell out of me because it felt like it was obscene. And then I saw that it wasn't an either-or proposition, that my heart could be breaking and it also could be empty. Question. Yes. Yeah. Let's not. We've got too few minutes to go on. I hear the question though, and I want to say you're absolutely right. That the sensitivity to the use of chemicals in sacramental ways, just like the use of anything else, has got to be tempered by what you understand about the capacity of the individual, their body, their history, their preparation, and only that individual really knows in their heart. You can't legislate what another person should do. You just got to trust in your own heart about that. And I think that there are lots and lots of bad trips, and those bad trips come out of bad setting, as we talked about a little while ago. It can talk about bad set. It can talk about bad chemistry. There are a lot of reasons. In the long run, bad trips and life is a bad trip. I mean, in the long run, trips are trips are trips are trips. And I mean, the president's on a trip. You're on lots of trips. I mean, I'm a parent. Well, great, enjoy it. Well, I'm not a parent. Well, good, that's your trip. Everybody's somebody. I mean, to meet anybody who's nobody is rare, I'll tell you. Everybody is somebody. And so all of them are bad trips because every trip, if you think it's real, constricts you. And the game is to be free of trips. So I agree with you, though. Question. Hello? Hello? Yeah. What? What is my view on open marriage? I think the issue is whether or not your actions create suffering or don't create suffering. That's where it begins and ends. And anything that you do that increases the distance between people or increases their entrapment in their separateness, that to me is a no-no. And within that, you can do whatever you want. So that two people could agree to have an open marriage because they don't identify their awareness with their sexual intimacy that extensively. And that's fine. That's fine. I think it's very hard to do without somebody in the scene getting hurt or pulling back or something. And I think you've got to look at what the initial contracts were. I think it's important that when you meet a person, if you're going to have open marriage, that be part of your contractual arrangement. It not be something that later you say, I've decided I want an open marriage. And I think you've got to deal with the fact that sex is an extremely powerful device for maintaining the species. And a lot of the stuff that goes with it is really deep in there. And before you play too lightly with it and turn it into less than a sacramental process, and think carefully about what the implications are for everybody involved. That's all I have to say. Is that all right? Is that fair? Yes. Not as all right. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
We owe a great debt to the people who have kept lineages alive and transmitted the compassion.
I think we owe a great debt to them, but what else could they do? You know, and I want to owe my debt, but I don't want to be trapped in indebtedness, because I feel all I owe my teachers is to become free for the compassion of all beings, as a compassionate act towards all beings. And so I do honor them. I honor them, but I don't want to get so overwhelmed with my honoring that I lose what the game's about. And I know that they did it because they did it. You know, you could say they did it for me, that's their problem. Ultimately, what happens is they become somebody who understands the Dharma and the truth, and then the greatest joy is to share it with other beings in as pure a way as you can do it. And am I going to say, oh, weren't you wonderful to do that? Like, people come up to me and say, Ram Dass, aren't you courageous? And it's bizarre. I mean, everything I did like it was falling off the log. I had to do it. It looks courageous from outside. It doesn't feel courageous from inside. So we're dealing with those kinds of issues as well. But I do agree in honoring. Yes, sir.
I'd like to talk about them. Who exactly are them?
Well, who are them? That's an interesting question. Who are them as somebody your mind sees as them? Like on my puja table, I have Bob Dole's picture. And I have the Buddha, and I have the Christ, and I have Anandamayi Ma, and I have the Divine Mother, and then I have Bob Dole. And in the morning, when I light my incense and I honor the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, and I honor my Guru, and I say my mantra, and I honor each of them. Good morning, Christ. Good morning, Buddha. Hello, Bob. And then I see how much work I have to do. Because Bob is just God in drag. What the hell? I mean, you know, where is he going to go? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to go on. This is a very choice and tasty audience to play with, but it's time for we've got to stop because of our contract here. Thank you so much. It's been a great evening.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love Serve Remember Foundation and ramdas.org. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate all the support that you've given us. Please continue that support and donate at ramdas.org. We can then continue to share what Ram Dass has been sharing for all of these years. Thank you.